So let's be honest, you've got a lot more opportunities now than really you ever have as a data scientist. So if you're joining a data science team, it's important to ask some questions. You need to understand whether the team that you're going on to is going to be a team that supports you, a team that helps set you up for a long-term career success, whether that's within the same business, within the same team, or going forward, whatever it is that you have long-term. The teams that you select are going to be a big piece of the success that you have throughout your career. You're supposed to be learning and growing in each one of your roles, and learning and growing with some sort of an objective. You want to get somewhere. And if you don't understand the team that you're joining, you could find yourself 6 months down the road hating the fact that you've made the move. And a lot of us are thinking about making moves right now. A lot of data scientists are looking at the number of opportunities, especially going from in person to a job where you have a lot of remote flexibility or a lot more control or interesting projects. But just because the grass seems greener on the other side doesn't necessarily mean it is. So you need these questions. You have to start asking the teams that you're about to join some basic questions. And I know that can be a little bit scary. It's hard sometimes to assess the people who you're used to purely assessing you. However, again, if these teams aren't ready to answer questions about how they operate and how they function, it's probably a really bad opportunity. Why? I mean, think about that. If you ask questions about the team and they don't want to answer your questions, think about how those people are going to be, especially at a leadership level. How are those people going to be to work with if they don't want to answer your questions, if they don't think your questions are worth answering? Is that really a team you want to work on? Are those really leaders you want to work for? Of course not. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And now let's go through some basic questions. What should you ask before joining a team? And the first one is, what is the team's purpose in the larger business? What is its role? A lot of companies don't understand where data science fits. And that means that if you join a team like that, you're set up to fail. You really are. You may not have any sort of impact on the business, and you can spend 2 years. And that 2 years, even though you were employed, it looks like a gap on your resume because there were no outcomes. You produced no results because that team isn't truly set up to produce any tangible outcomes for the business. Business doesn't understand how to use it. So you have to ask this question. What you're listening for in a good answer is talk about who they support. Which other business units do they support? What customers, external customers, and what products do they support? You want to hear them talk about business goals. What do they do, and how does the work of the data science and machine learning team line up with the larger goals of the business? You need to have that connection. Without it, it's impossible to get buy-in for data science in any long-term sense. And the projects you're working on, number one, they'll either be disconnected from the business, or number two, the business doesn't really understand how it connects. So that's a problem. And finally, you want to hear them discuss who their executive sponsors are. This is back to buy-in. If the business understands data science and machine learning contribute to the bottom line, obviously there are going to be executive sponsors who want to support projects and who will get behind implementing data science and adopting products, both internal and external. And that's critical to your success within the team. Now, what leads into that is, how do you choose projects? How does the data science team decide what it's going to work on? And you want to hear a process for project selection that's controlled by the team, but also connected to the business. You do not want the team to be a commodity where the business simply dictates, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this, and insulates the team in a silo where the team isn't able to influence its own roadmap. That's a setup to fail. So you want to hear, when you ask a question about how does the team pick projects, you want to hear that process, and you want to hear how that process connects with the larger business so that you know that connection's there. And so you know that the work that you do is going to be interesting, but also impactful. Now, what's your project success rate? Just because they're picking projects doesn't mean that they're actually getting into production. And that's what you want to hear. You want to hear a little bit of an outline of how projects make it to production, how they get into the hands of users. But you also want to hear about how they abandon dead-end projects. This is really important. Not every project is going to be successful, and especially with data science and machine learning, when you start getting into the research side, the business needs a structured process for killing projects that just don't look like they're going to get to any sort of business value. That happens a lot. You want to end those projects as early on as possible so the business isn't wasting money and the team isn't wasting time. But you also want to have the majority of projects that are taken on be successful, get into production, and actually make the business some money. So you don't want to hear that every project is a failure, but you also, more than that, are listening for leadership in the team to understand how often their projects make it to production. What kind of impacts do their projects have on the larger business? You want to make sure the team's tracking that. If they're not, then who knows? Is that team actually producing anything? Do you really want to work on a team that has no idea, no real connection to outcomes in at least a structured enough way that they can say, hey, this is what we've accomplished over the last year? You at least want to hear that level of tracking and connection to project outcomes, because once there's a disconnect between the data science team and outcomes, they become a silo. A lot of companies will start looking at them and saying, okay, why do we have these teams? Why are we investing so much money? Why are we doing these projects? Can we trust the outcomes? Those are bad questions for businesses to ask, especially from a career standpoint. You are on a team that potentially is becoming irrelevant to the business or is going to go through significant churn. You may want to be part of the solution, which is a great decision on your part. But you also want to know what you're getting into on the way in, not find out 6 to 8 months later that you're on a team that's struggling and going through some churn and you really haven't set yourself up for success. You may be part of the churn if you don't know what you're going into. Now, next, what's the team structure and how is work divided up? And you're looking for a managed process. You want there to be some sort of managed work discovery assignment, anything. You can talk about agile, waterfall, any scrum, any number of different methodologies for deciding who works on what. And everybody has a favorite. I'm not advocating for one over the other, but you want to go on a team that has a process for managing work. That's not just a pure cowboy shop where everybody works on whatever they want to, because that's chaos and a setup for failure. And you want to hear a single workflow. I mean, that's best case scenario. Some companies and data science teams are working towards that, where you may have had sort of a merging of teams or they've scaled up rapidly and there may be a couple of different workflows and they're working on consolidating it, which is perfectly logical, reasonable answer to get is we have a couple of workflows and we're working on it. We're working on consolidating it. That's where a lot of companies are right now. You also want to hear that there's some sort of collaborative process, that people don't just get projects dropped on them and it's you until you deliver, and then the only feedback you get is some criticism. It's not, you want a collaborative process, and you want to hear the leader talk about how they facilitate collaboration and how work is divvied up so that people are working together on solutions to make better products and better outcomes, rather than depending upon an individual to put it all on their shoulders and carry it forward. And it is getting so complex when it comes to a machine learning project that you really need a team structure and you need different roles, different skill sets in order to be successful long term. So you want to understand that this is a team rather than individual contributor from end to end. You're responsible for everything. That's a bad setup. And some teams are working towards that. In some cases, you may be one of the first few data science hires, and so that's something the team is working on. Again, team structure is almost always a work in progress. So if you see someone say, hey, we have some shortcomings and we're doing this and this to resolve them, perfectly valid answer, great team to be a part of. You also want to hear how leadership is going to track projects and how they keep them connected with the business. Typically, these are some fairly high-level answers, and that's fine, as long as there is a structured mechanism for the people who are in charge of the team to track project progress, make sure everything stays on the rails, and make sure it stays connected to the business. And finally, you also want to hear some sort of structure for technical mentorship, project reviews. You may be the technical mentor, or you may be a person who is mentored, who is being upskilled. And in most jobs, you'll find yourself in both roles. Not everyone can know everything. And again, back to making sure that projects are a team effort, not an individual solo shot type of work, because you want to be able to build your skills as a mentor. It's very important to teach what you know. It's also important to continuously develop your skills. And while individual, self-paced, self-guided learning is an important piece of that, getting hands-on and having someone guide you, having a technical mentor, is also really important when it comes to career growth and learning path. Data science is constantly changing. New tools and approaches are being introduced all the time. Having a guide helps, and being a guide is a huge step forward for your career. So you want to hear this technical mentorship setup and an understanding, again, back to team structure, that it's expected for you to teach and to learn and have people who will help and who are dedicated. Their role is in some way, shape, or form measured by their ability to be a mentor. Next question. What's the relationship like between the machine learning team and your development organizations? There's external developers that you're going to be working with. How about other business units and stakeholders? How about senior leadership? You want to understand that the data science team is not a silo, that it has a relationship with other business units, with other teams that it relies on for either inputs into what type of projects that it's working on, or outputs, people who are going to take their products and projects and either implement them or use them in some way, shape, or form, maybe even advocate for them, as that relationship with senior leadership should be an advocacy relationship. They advocate for the data science team. The data science team delivers products and projects that are aligned with the needs of senior leadership and the things that senior leadership talk about expecting from the data science team, and that requires a relationship. The first part of the answer that you're listening for is a managed communications process. How do people from outside of the machine learning team get access to the machine learning team and communicate everything from needs to requirements to potential opportunities to questions about how to use something, feedback? What's the managed process? Is there a process for intentionally building relationships so that the data science team becomes more effective as a partner to the business? Is there some sort of intentional relationship building process and intentionally managed communications process? You don't want chaos, but you also need accessibility. And so that's a built process. So it's important for the data science team to be doing that, for leadership to be working on it. You want to hear the word trust and an effort to build trust within other business units with senior leadership. That's everything from just saying we're going to do difficult pieces, talking about what Jeff Bezos says with Amazon. We're going to do difficult things and we're going to do what we say we're going to do. We're going to deliver. That's building trust. And that's a very important piece of the process when it comes to relationship with other teams. Do they collaborate with stakeholders? You want to hear that collaboration with stakeholders in some way, shape, or form, taking into account stakeholders and managing a relationship with those stakeholders that's positive. And finally, you got buy-in and support from senior leadership. That's critical. You want to hear that as part of the answer when it comes to talking about senior leadership. Do they buy in? Do we have a relationship of trust? Those are important. Without all of that, you could be siloed. And again, that's career limiting, because what are you delivering? Is it relevant? When you go to take that next step within the business, is there going to be one? If the business doesn't trust the data science team, if senior leadership isn't bought in, is the data science team going to grow and offer you opportunities for growth? Or if you leave, are you going to be able to point to any significant accomplishments aside from, hey, I did this cool project? Because obviously that's not the measurement of a data scientist. It's great that you did cool projects, but what was the impact? It's always going to be the next question. And without good relationships with all of those external teams, you don't really have any outcomes to point at. So that's really important to understand, that the team is intentionally building relationships and trust and managing the communication flow in and out of the team. You don't want it to be complete chaos. It's really important that it not be complete chaos. Career path. I talked about that internal advancement. You want to hear that there's some career path. So what is a career path for a data scientist? That's a difficult question, isn't it? It's not well defined, but every business should have some career path for a data scientist. Where do you go next? What opportunities are there within the organization for you to advance and move forward? It's not enough to take a job that's a dead end. I mean, maybe you're okay with that. Maybe this is just a quick stop, 1 year, but think about it. Don't you want the opportunity to advance within your current company and current role? Don't you want to work for companies that care enough to provide a career path forward for data scientists? Because that's a key part of retention. Companies that focus on retaining, which means they're going to treat you well, which means that they're going to appreciate you in a way that avoids you burning out, they're going to create a career path for you. They're going to have some sort of defined way forward so that you can grow with the company and with the company needs and continue to meet the company's needs, both short-term and long-term. So before you join a team, make sure that there's somewhere to go. Because without it, I mean, think about that. A team that doesn't care about career path, they're not developing you. They're not focused on retention. Do you really want to work on a team and for a company that isn't focused on retention? It's a dicey career prospect. So obviously this is a very important question to ask, but everyone is going to have a different answer. And so this is personalized to you. Is their answer something that you're interested in? Is that the career path you are looking to pursue? And if it's not, that's a completely legitimate reason to potentially turn down a job. If it's just going to be a year and you're looking for something long-term, if you're looking for something more stable, then a career path that aligns with your career goals is pretty important. So listen for one, and then don't think that there is one correct answer. The correct answer is the one that you listen to and say, yes, that's something that I want to do long-term. That's a career path that I'm interested in following. So again, focus on career path. Make sure they have one. Make sure they're interested in developing and retaining their employees, especially in the data science team. Now, finally, how do they assess performance? When we talk about career advancement, it's all well and good to have a career path, but how do you get assessed? How do you see if you're qualified for the next step, for promotion, for raises? Does the business, and more importantly, does team leadership have a structured process to assess you and your performance? And you want to hear some sort of rubric, just some set of objective criteria. Even though evaluation is almost entirely subjective, you want to hear at least some sort of framework, some sort of process. And you want to listen for things like bonuses and incentives based on performance. I mean, just some sort of reward for high performers. It can be promotions, bonuses. Like I said, those are, incentive or performance related bonuses are awesome. You want to hear that there's going to be some appreciation. If you go above and beyond, you deserve some recognition outside of a good performance review. Okay, great. But what else? And so you want to hear that there's some reward for you because you're going to put a lot of passion and return a lot of value to the business. You want to make sure that you don't burn out by being unappreciated. That's a horrible team to work on, where they just say, hey, good job, congratulations, that's it. That's not enough to keep you satisfied in most cases. It's not enough for people to just pat you on the back. There should be something behind that pat on the back if you go above and beyond, if you are a high performer or one of the top performers in the team. So you want to listen for that incentive. There's got to be something involved. And next, you also want to hear penalties. This is big, and we don't think about it because we all think of ourselves as high performers, but you have to look at just think about it. If there are no penalties for failing to perform, well, then the team is going to continually have people who aren't performing well stay there. And that's not the team that you want to work on. You want to work on a team where performance is encouraged and rewarded, but at the same time, mediocrity is not. Mediocrity is either managed up, this is old Microsoft concept, manage up or manage out. That means that team leadership is actively working to improve low performers, But at the same time, if that person is unable or unwilling to rise and meet the needs of the business, they are moved out of the team, transitioned out, so that you are not constantly working to support low performing members of the team. Again, that's a path to burnout. And so you want incentives for performance, and you also want consequences for failing to meet standards. So those are your key questions. Those are some of the most important things for you to ask. And none of these questions should hit the team that you're asking them of from left field. These shouldn't be surprises. These are basics, things that every company has covered in most of their other teams. So the data science team should be no exception. They should have some pretty high quality, succinct answers to each one of these questions that give you a level of confidence that you're joining a team that you're going to, number one, not burn out on immediately. That's going to set you up for internal and external success, and that has some relationship and connection to the larger business as a whole. It has a place. That place is well understood, and the team is working to continually improve the value that they return to the business. Those are all critical success factors. And in a lot of cases, you can join a team without asking the right questions, and it's a big career mistake. It can be career limiting in some cases. When you try to move on, that job that you spent maybe 12 to 24 months in ends up being an anchor where you have to continually explain why you didn't produce or why there were some issues with what you put into production. And if you work for a company that publicly, in the public spotlight or in the media has challenges and issues with their AI initiatives or the digital transformation initiatives, those types of things get out, and it can be career limiting. Ask quality questions because you have more opportunities than you think. So pick and choose, be selective, ask some of these questions, and make sure that your career is going in an upwards trajectory with the new company that you're thinking about joining, not stagnating or potentially even going backwards. Set yourself up to be happy and really enjoy your role.